finger, a pickle finger, or what? You got to sit here and watch it. It's funny. Really. Okay, welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, Pflugerville, Texas. And this week, I've had this been over and over and over again from Isaiah 26:3, thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. And I don't know about you, but in watching the world around us, it's definitely not been perfect peace. So I really think that's the kind of conversation this morning. And I want to go in and look at what Jesus had to say. I'm going to get my book, the Bible. And paraphrasing all the work of Jesus, he kept saying, forgive. And he kept saying, the kingdom of heaven is within. And he kept saying, love. And, one of the things that's interesting, the historical Jesus, a lot of people don't really understand that he was a radical. He really was. If you go in and read the New Testament, and please read the red letter edition, don't read all the other stuff. Read the letter and what he said. And he ripped the Pharisees apart, agreed? Yeah. And the Sadducees, and he wasn't very kind to Pontius Pilate. So the established order, now keep in mind, most of the political events occurred in the church at that time, the Hebrew church. And in that context, he was constantly criticizing them. And he was doing it in a very nice way. He didn't condemn them or anything, but he just said, you guys are off on the wrong tangent. And what he was really trying to say is that each of you are a divine human being, is what his message was. And get over it and stop trying to pontificate and run everything. And in today's world, we're back into that similar situation. Yeah. So the kingdom of heaven is within, and where are we going, what are we doing? And we just sang a hymn called Living in a World Awakening. And there's a little voice that says, awakening to what? And it's interesting how things kind of come to you when you're asking. I have things stored away. Anybody have piles of stuff? And thankfully, Madeline cleans up after me sometimes. And she was cleaning up a pile of stuff. And she just brought this over. And this is the little pamphlet that we give out. This is Unity, a Positive Path to Spiritual Living. And it's a compendium of what Unity believes. And here, the nature of humankind. So the nature of humankind, according to this booklet, and I'm going to read it, and then we'll talk about it. It says, we are each individual, eternal expressions of God. So each one of us, each one of you, each one of the 7 billion people out there on the face of the earth are individual expressions of God, eternal expressions of God. Now, as far as I know, eternal means for a long time. Maybe forever. So it's difficult for us in our human experience to understand that we are divine, number one. Each one of us is divine. And we are eternal in our being. So right there is a beginning phrase that's really amazing. And it's a phrase I believe we have forgotten about. So we're living in a time of man-made culture. And we'll develop that a little bit. But if we are individual expressions of God and we are eternal, we are creating the world we live in. So look around you, and if you don't like the world you see, who created the world we see? So each one of us, one of the keys to Ho'oponopono, which is the Hawaiian spiritual tract that Joe Vitale talks about. He says one of the keys is, I love you, spirit. So I'm sorry for anything I saw because I'm responsible for everything I see. Please forgive me. In other words, get rid of the subconscious belief that created what I see, and then thank you. So Joe's work is, and Dr. Hugh Lin was, to keep saying that over and over again to heal, or what they call clean up my past. So as far as we know, the Garden of Eden was a metaphor. It means in the beginning, each one of us was created perfect and whole. And Genesis says that. It says God saw what he created, or I should say it created, and saw that it was good, and only good. Okay, now, what was interesting is today's daily word that Valerie just read, the scripture was kind of fascinating to me, because it says, the good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good. So deep within us, in our heart, is a good pattern. And that's the process of the divinity that we are. And we're living in an imperfect world. Anybody agree with that, by the way? Yes. You know, I did turn the TV on. and it's an imperfect world. And what's interesting is no matter how you figure it out on the physical level, something happens. It doesn't work. It's like right now, people want to take guns away from everybody. Fine. Historically, when you take guns away from people, there are societies where the people that have the guns or the government takes over and runs the people. And so it's back and forth. So there's all these, no matter what you do, human beings have a way of diverting or corrupting the system. You can talk about socialism, you can talk about capitalism, and each one works fine, each one doesn't work in its own context, because they are human conceived, human ideas, not based on spiritual principles. And it's really, really that simple. Now, what is the answer? Here's the cut. You ready? We're talking about a spiritual answer for a physical problem. And so in the world today, we are working on the world's beliefs, the world's conditioning, the world's culture. And Larry gave me a book, by the way, and it's called The Son of Man. It's about Jesus. And it really, the book itself, and I'll be talking about it more, but the book itself wants us to look at the historical Jesus who came to change the government and change the way of life at the time. And what happened to him? Somebody help me. He tried to change things. What did they do? He got crucified. Okay, now we're not there today, but the whole idea is where are we going? What are we doing? What kind of world are we awakening to? And so it's a conversation of a spiritual context in a physical environment. And it's kind of like, okay, I didn't expect to be where I am right now. It's interesting. So let me go to my notes. The Bible says in many ways the kingdom of heaven is within. And it also says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So we're looking at the inside, or who we are, in the silence. One of the most difficult things for us to do is to be quiet. Anybody ever notice a radio has to be always blaring? We have to have TV on to keep us company. We have to be active. We have to be doing something. And part of that, I believe, is the ego wants to keep us distracted so we don't go within and we don't be with spirit. Because be still and know that I am God is also biblical, and it talks about going into a closet. Matthew 6 is considered part of the Sermon on the Mount. And I would like to read this, I really would. Because we are at a point in our world where things, the way we've done things in the past aren't working, obviously. So what do we do? And this is Matthew 6. I'm going to say 6. But as for you, when you pray, enter into your inner chamber and lock your door. So it's close the door. To what? The world around us. All of the junk. Does anybody agree sometimes your next door neighbor or whomever, maybe it's your spouse, sometimes you don't like the words you hear? Not my spouse. But it's really interesting that we take things so seriously. If anybody's ever part of, we had an HOA experience just this week, and there's a member of the HOA that's screaming and hollering. Why? Because we or the HOA has offended them. So how come somebody gets triggered so heavily? Because it's the outside belief in a power other than spirit. You see, if I think I'm a victim, what do I have to fight back against?
The oppression.
See, if I'm a victim, I have to fight back against the person that's victimizing me. And in the idea of spiritual integrity, when I fight back, I'm actually making my adversary stronger. Okay, so it's a fascinating thing to me that we are saying here, and I'm going to say this again, but for you, when you enter into your inner chamber and lock your door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and it goes on and says, and your Father who sees in secret shall reward you openly. And when you pray, do not repeat your words like pagans. And it goes on and on and talks. But basically it's saying, when we really want something, when we want to go into communication. Now, the word prayer in our popular dictionaries generally means supplication, asking for. I'd like to give you an idea that maybe it means communication. Maybe it means being in the presence of spirit. There, generally, throughout history, most religions have talked about an energy for good in the universe. Quantum physics has said there's an energy in the universe that they can't describe. But there's an energy for good in the universe. And the problem is, all religions, all systems have tried to figure out ways to align with that energy of good. And the energy for good is there for good. Now, the energy itself does not say, here's what I want you to do. It says, okay. The example I had a friend used to use is like Aladdin with the lamp. And Aladdin had those 3 wishes, and you remember the story that he could rub the lamp and make 3 wishes, and the wishes would come. Well, it's like rubbing the lamp. I would like to feel better about myself, and the energy says, okay. But the other part of that is, I don't like my neighbor. He's on my fence. Okay. So what we speak and what we think and what we give to the world is what we're creating in our world. And then we wonder why there's shootings, and we wonder why we can't get along. We can't even get along with each other in the same religions and in the same race, let alone get into racial conversations, let alone get into cultural conversations, because we keep seeing differences rather than similarities in love. So the universal word is called love. The kingdom of heaven is within, and God's energy is love. And the question is, how do we align with love? Well, here's a basic idea. You ready? How do you cannot create peace with conflict. It's true. Because they don't go together. So how do I create peace and love? I generate peace and love. So if I want peace and love in my life, I have to give peace and love in my life to others. So rather than criticize, condemn, and complain, the idea is to praise, appreciate, and uplift. And look for the good in people. Now, sometimes it's difficult to find good in people, agree? But everybody, I don't care who they are, and I've done this in the past, and I'm going to ask you to do it again. But this week, I'd like you to take an adversary, somebody you can't stand. Okay, might be political, not going to mention any names, might be a next door neighbor, might be a friend or a next friend, might be a relative, and look for the good in that person. Because no matter who they are, as a child of God, they are good, and they express good. And once I learn to express good in love, that's what starts coming into my life. So, there's an energy for good in the universe. Part of our job is to get into alignment with that so we can create a peaceful environment in our lives. The issue becomes, though, it impacts those around us. Because as far as we know, we are radiating beings of energy, and we're also transmitters and receivers of that same energy. So as we give off love, love comes back. It's one of those simple law of attraction. Whatever we put out comes back, and everybody's heard about it. But practicing it and applying it to day-to-day life becomes very interesting. And if you really look at the life of Jesus, that's what he was here to say. I mean, what did he do? He said, he's on the cross. His Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So he was sending love in the middle of one of the major crises in his life. So in looking at that, how do I send love in a major crisis in my life? And how do we do that as a church? How do we do that as human beings? How do we do that politically? How do we do that culturally? And in the process, it takes work. Now, here's the issue. You ready? We have been trained to criticize, condemn, and complain. Agree? It's amazing to me. Matt and I used to do seminars, and one of the things we do is we set the room up, and then I'd set a chair up just a little bit. And people would see the cockeyed chair first before they saw anything else. Why? Because we're trained to see something that is out of order, in our opinion. So it's being out of order, and maybe being out of order is where we should be in alignment. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, stop and think about next time you go to criticize or condemn, could I show love in this? Now, this is a little crack in the armor of negativity, if you will. Because it begins, one person has to start it. So here we can start it, and you folks are doing a good job. What we did earlier, I just love when you're in this group, I love you. You're wonderful, you really are. And I'm asking us to take it out into the world, and we are changing the world in that little bit that we are doing that. It's called practical Christianity. Valerie wants to say something.
So in your challenge for this week, in finding someone who we have a not perfect relationship
yes,
with.
That's a good way to put it.
One of the keys to is forgiveness, and part of that showing love is think about how when someone doesn't do something exactly the way maybe you think they should, or they say something that hurts you, finding a reason for forgiveness, finding a reason for why they may have done that. Put yourself in their shoes. Show some compassion. And it's not always easy, but that's one of the ways that you can work on yourself, because it really is truly about your perception and what you believe and what I believe and how we can make a difference in the world. In loving is also the big piece that Jesus came to teach us, was forgiveness.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's like, I don't know how to, an analogy came to me. It's like a big pile of manure. And what we're doing is slowly shoveling it out. Do you understand? It's like people have been abused for years. The male, female, and the abuse that men have perpetrated on women, historically, not today, historically, that's still a cloud hanging there. The racial inequalities, it's like a cloud hanging there. The culture issues that have occurred between, countries that have fought each other, those are energies still in the overall soul, the cloud. And how we're going to clean it up, we're going to understand people. How can somebody that has been abused most of their life then forgive? It takes work, it takes time, it takes effort. One of the major issues in AA is getting people to look at and understand their own issues and then forgive those around them. And forgive self first, but also learn learn to forgive others. Because we live in an imperfect world. Everybody there? And not everybody thinks that way. But I believe it's possible to start the process, and over a period of time, things will slowly change. You see, we've gotten here one step at a time. We've gotten here one abuse at a time. We've gotten here one negative thought at a time. So we can do it the other way. One pat on the back at a time, one appreciation at a time, one love at a time. So, and who's going to do it? You can say, well, I can't do it. Sure you can. It's a decision you make to live a different life. And it does take time. It does take time. Because if sometimes I wonder what I'm saying. If I go back 20 years, I wonder, how did that come out? Because I'm different than I was 20 years ago. And we're all creatures, we're all outcomes of our past, and it's learning to look at myself, my past, but other people's past. Thank you, Beth. Okay? I think a recent the main thing is to close the door. Let it go. Understand that people themselves are imperfect. I'm imperfect. I'm living in an imperfect world. And I'm a perfect human being, expressing my divinity in a perfect way. Because I refuse to get sucked into the world's beliefs. And that's, you know why? Because I love you. And you are all a blessing. And no matter what, good comes from good. Thank you. Amen.